When we look to the future, when we're trying to formulate what our sales activity plan will be for our organisation, whether that's a theatre company trying to estimate what the revenues it will be generating over the next 12 months, whether that's a dance company trying to do the same thing, whether it's a manufacturing company trying to estimate the level of product sales it will generate, a freelancer, a consultant doing the same thing, trying to formulate what your sales line will look like, your revenue line, your turnover, which is the arbiter, the thing that will determine the level of resources you can deploy, is a very problematic and very difficult thing. In this week's video, I'm actually going to look at some of the dangers inherent in either being too ambitious and also being too restrictive in our outlook, in our sales forecast, and some sanity checks that we can introduce to try and avoid either being too overtly ambitious and too overtly cautious. Hi folks, my name is Mahmood. I am a business finance fixer, tax advisor, and author of the book I Hate Numbers. I'm the owner of the firm I Hate Numbers and Numbers Know-How, and for nearly 30 years I've been helping creative organisations, private sector organisations, small businesses make more money, get to grips with their planning processes and running the businesses that they have, reducing their stress and anxiety, and having those organisations and businesses they aspire to have. Now I want that for you. Let's crack on with the video. Now, when we look into the future, in itself, that is an uncertain landscape. We don't actually know with 100% clarity what's going to be happening in the next 7 days. So trying to formulate what's going to happen over the next 12 months has its risks, has its problems, but nevertheless, we must have an idea of what's going to go on through the windscreen of our business organisations. Now, one way we might formulate our forecasts is to look at history to see what the pattern of sales have actually been, to generate the sales from that forecast here. And if we just do a straight, we did this much level of sales last year, we're going to repeat it next year here, that for me is quite restrictive and it lacks ambition. Whatever plan you come up with, whether it's too cautious, if you go to the other extreme and you think you're going to double the level of revenue that you have, numbers on a piece of paper, numbers through a planning platform like Budget Whiz, see the link for further information, putting those numbers in without any thought or any correlation or any stress testing is quite straightforward. But remember, computers will not have the emotion and not have that sense check to check if what you're doing has some validity to it. So when you formulate your sales lines, whether it's based on a historical happening, whether it's based on your ambitions for the futures, make sure you build some stress tests into it. So for example, if I'm going to be formulating a sales line that says my level of revenue from my theatrical performances will be 50% more than they are this current year, the conversations that I should be having with my stakeholders, with the people who work in the organisation, my mixed team of planners, will be saying things like, what is that based on? If I converted that into, for example, the number of tickets being sold, the number of performances being delivered, the audience size that I've got, the demographics, the average spend that I've got, does that bear up? Does that have some validity? Have I achieved those numbers historically? If I'm looking to increase those numbers, what am I actually doing in terms of marketing effort? What am I doing in terms of reaching out and developing those audiences that I'm not doing already? So by all means have that ambition, but make sure you've got something to back it up. And for me, a key clear approach is that when you come up with a forecast, work it back to, for example, bums on seats, excuse that expression, the average spend that somebody will be making, what that has been historically, perhaps do some market research, but get some validity for that forecast. Now, conversely, if you're being overtly pessimistic and you just have a natural pessimism to forecasting and your sales line is going to be on a similar level, if not less than the previous year, have you factored in things like occupancy? Have you factored things like participation? Have you factored in things that any anomalies that may have occurred historically that aren't likely to repeat themselves? And certainly in my first level of forecasting, when I help clients put together their financial plans, I always go on what the story is telling me. What is it that's going to happen in the organisation over the next typically 12 months? What's going to happen in terms of activity, whether it's marketing, audience development? What's going to be happening with the investments that I'm making? what's going to happen in terms of that progress of audiences, customers, clients consume what I'm offering. What's the impact and reaction to that? Am I supporting that by the appropriate level of marketing spend? Or is my investment in marketing spend, what are my expectations in terms of what that will generate through terms of audience numbers, conversions and the like? Formulating a sales plan, a sales target, is just that. Create your first draft, review your first draft, and stress test that. But make sure you've got some robustness behind how you've arrived at those forecasts. For me, I think a good practice to do when you're doing any form of forecasting is to state your assumptions clearly at the outset. When you revisit and you modify that forecast, you've got some assumptions that you can look at, you can stress test to see if anything has changed. Is there assumptions made behind the average amount that people will be spending? Is there an assumption about conversions from web traffic that you might have? Have you got a mechanism in how to track those things and how to capture it? So folks, when you put together your sales forecast, which is typically the leader, is the first primary budget you should be preparing, make sure you've got a way of actually looking at it, questioning it, interrogating it, stress testing it, before you start to overlay the costs and the resources also required in the organization. Now, if you've got a digital system, for example, that's going to be really powerful to extract that historical data. If you're in a situation, you've got no history, you're a brand new startup, you might be introducing a product or a service that's brand new, there are different ways that we can come up with a sales forecast. And I'll address that in a future I Hate Numbers video. So I hope you found this useful. And my key takeaway would be, whenever you come up with a financial forecast, make sure you've got some substance behind of how you built those numbers up. If you've based it on a volume indicator like number of people participating, number of people coming to a show, number of people buying your product, and you're relating it to the price, get those building blocks and make sure you've arrived at your forecast in a sensible way. Be ambitious by all means, but make sure you can support what you're actually going to be doing to arrive at that ambition. Are you being unduly pessimistic? Undue pessimism can actually also be a negative impact on your business. It restricts your movements, it limits your ambition, and it may things that you want to do don't actually materialize as a result. I'm going to be expanding on this theme in a bit more detail in future video, okay, under the umbrella of Plan It, Do It, Profit. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me what you think. How do you go about formulating a forecast? Until next time, happy forecasting.